Big Podcast.
It is the last episode of the year, so I want to say thank you for joining me this year. This is also possibly the last episode for a while that I'm doing in the $158 podcasting studio, and that is going into a Shure SM58. It's a $99 microphone, and Vocaster 1 by Focusrite. That's the interface. That's going for $59 right now. If you need the links, you know where to get them. Newsletter.bigpodcast.com. All of the links to everything that I talk about will be there. This is the audio version of issue 212, my weekly newsletter called Big Podcast Insider. It goes out every Friday morning, New York City time. If you're interested, same link, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. It's Build a Big Podcast, by the way. If you didn't know what you were listening to, this is the marketing podcast for podcasters. I'm going to help you grow your audience, get more people to your podcast, make more money with your podcast. And this coming year, have more success than you had this year. And maybe you had a great year this year. Make the upcoming year even better than this year was. Here's what we are going to talk about. Thanksgiving Revisited. Podcasters are rejecting the author interview format. 28 podcasting predictions for the new year. We're not going to do all of them, don't worry. Just some of the important ones. How to automate your podcast guest booking for $39. How to protect your podcast. You know, a lot of podcasts are getting hacked. A couple ways to do that. I'm going to tell you how to make sure that it doesn't happen to you. Talk about Conan O'Brien. You know, he did not want a video podcast. And I'm the same way. I'm an audio first guy. We're going to dig into that just a little bit and see what happened when he did go to video. Also some classified ads. Things will help you to grow your podcast, get more people to your podcast, make a better podcast, make money with your podcast. The things that this podcast is about. This episode of Build a Big Podcast brought to you by Riverside.fm. You've heard me talking about it. You haven't tried it yet? Why not, man? Get a free account. They're going to give you a couple of hours to look under the hood, kick the tires, do some interviews. You are going to sound like you are in the same room with your co-host, with your guest, regardless of where you are in the world. I don't take this technology for granted. We are living in the future. The good old days, they are here. And Riverside.fm, that is part of it. They've got AI tools to help you market your podcast, AI tools to help you with your social media, things to give guests to help them pass along to their audiences so you can get their audiences to your podcast. They're going to make it really easy for you. Again, you can try it for free. Riverside.fm, they're going to give you a couple of hours. I've got a discount code because you're going to want to stick around. And this is going to get you 15% off for life on the already low rates. This is what to do. Again, go to Riverside.fm, get that free account. When you want to stick around, this is the discount code. Big Podcast, BIGPODCAST. That's Riverside.fm, the discount code. Big Podcast, BIGPODCAST. All right, let's get into it. You know how I do it. I go from thing to thing to thing, all the things that I just mentioned. They are all about podcasting. When I am done with a thing, getting ready to go to the next thing, I'm going to remind you that if you want more information, you want to see what I've written about it, you want all the links, go to newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Then I'm going to play this sound. That's how you know we're moving on. You ready? Thanksgiving Revisited. The end of the year, always a time to look back and also look forward, but I've been looking back so far. If you're looking way back, actually not that far back, just a few years ago, we are in a totally different world than we used to be when it comes to recording audio. Talked about Riverside.fm, something like that, where in your house with a standard internet connection, you can have a remote connection that makes it sound like you were in the same room, regardless of where your guest or your co-host is in the world. That's amazing. Back in the day. And again, just a few years ago, this is when I started in radio. This is when I was doing music, definitely. We were recording on magnetic tape. We were putting it on pieces of plastic, and we had to work like crazy to get this music to people. If I were to tell you about a song right now or a podcast, what would you do? While you're listening to me, you might go on your phone, search for that song online, search for that podcast online. You could hear it before I'm even done with this segment. Not so back in the day. I might have to mail it to you. If it was something in the store, did the store have it? Would they have to special order it? Could they special order it? So for me to get the word out about any kind of radio that I was doing, any kind of music that I was promoting, we're talking one envelope at a time, one visit at a time, one phone call at a time, one person at a time. Sometimes these things would take off, then you'd have another problem. How are we going to get all these pieces of plastic to people? Vinyl, CDs, cassettes. We're in the holiday season. There's a big album every year, even now, but especially back in the day when things were really dependent on CDs and vinyl. I remember one time I was working on a small release. This was independent. 1,000, 1,100 copies maybe. Sometimes you do a 10% overrun. And I needed to get it out, but the factory was busy pressing Spice Girls records. Hey, sorry, man. We got 5 billion Spice Girls records we've got to do. We can't squeeze your 1,100 albums in. You got to wait till February. That was a real problem because you'd spend all this money and time on promotion. Something would take off quickly. You couldn't get in line to get the music out to people. It wasn't like today where you put something online. Think about your podcast. 1,000 people download it, 10,000 people download it. Doesn't matter to you, but it matters when you're putting something on plastic, having to mail it, get it to a store, get it to a distributor. Thankfully, we don't have those things today. We got other problems. We got a lot more noise for you to compete against, but we've got a lot more solutions too. It's very easy to reminisce about the good old days, and certainly older podcasters can do that. And I'm talking about not just age, although older, I'm talking about starting around 2005. So you'd be in the game for 20 years. Maybe you're 30 if you started at 10 years old. Anyway, the guys that started about 20 years ago, a lot of them will say, well, back in the day, tell you how hard it is or how great things were and how there was a community. And that's true. I think we were all really excited when podcasting came along because, again, we were putting stuff on plastic. It was free form. We didn't have all these formats that we felt like we had to fit into, or competition like Joe Rogan or Call Her Daddy, or competition from big companies, NPR, CNN. It was a lot like the early days of the internet. And I'm not talking about the early days of the educational internet. Internet's been going on for a while, 70s, 80s, depending on how you define it. But the commercial internet really started in the mid-90s. AOL was the first really big commercial enterprise to come online, and it flipped instantly the number of people who were on the internet that were just people, normal people, not academics. Before then, a lot of college kids, I was one of them, .edu, then all of a sudden .com, AOL.com. There are a lot of people that thought the internet was AOL. And the collective IQ of the internet dropped down. So you have those guys too. Think, oh man, podcasting is very similar to that for that reason. You had these guys that were smart with technology. They loved electronics. They feel like they owned podcasting. They had control of it. And now they don't. And that's one way to look at it. But the other way to look at it is we're so much bigger. You're in it. I'm in it. They're in it. Even more people are listening. And we can create this new thing. So I'm very, very thankful that we've got this technology. I'm very thankful for digital editing. I will leave you with this. I was talking to a record producer, and we were talking about analog versus digital, which is very similar to the argument that you have with podcasters. Back in the day, we used to do this, and they're pining to code their own RSS feeds and blah, 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 whatever. You hear that in music too. Analog is warmer, it's better. And this guy said this, and it is true. He said, those people pining over analog have never recorded with analog. Digital is far superior. Overall, there might be some things that analog does better. Digital is far superior. Certainly it is with editing. When I started editing, razor blade. If I continue that path, I would not have 10 fingers, but here I am. Hey, quick note. If you've got a friend who would be a good match to join us in this journey of moving forward with podcasting for the new year, will you let them know about this podcast, the newsletter? All the information, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Thank you very much. Real quick, I want to talk about Big Podcast AMP. AMP, it stands for Audio Monetization Program. It's a personal coaching program. It's you working with me, and I'm going to help you do 3 things. 1, grow your podcast audience. 2, get people talking about your podcast. 3, make more money with your podcast and your podcasting skills. You're finishing out the year. You think, I had these big plans for my podcast. It didn't really work out like I wanted it to. Don't have another year like that. Let's make the next year better for you than this year. You can work with me one-on-one. I will help you do that. Hold your hand You'll work alongside me and other podcasters that are working just as hard as you are in what I call Big Podcast AMP. Audio monetization program. You can find more information at bigpodcast.com/AMP. That's bigpodcast.com/AMP. Podcasters are rejecting the author interview format. A couple issues ago, I talked about what Tim Ferriss is doing when it comes to interviewing authors. He's trying to get lesser known guests. At least that's what he said, where he wants people that everybody knows, maybe Stephen King. And he also wants people that nobody knows. And I think a lot of podcasters do this. We want to be tastemakers. Something I think he's doing that's pretty smart, and this is something for you to think about, is getting caught in the middle. If you've got the tastemaker stuff where you're discovering something that's brand new, it hasn't hit yet, you're excited about it, you have the power to get other people excited about it, that's compelling. Or if you've got the big leagues coming to your podcast, and if you're in business, for example, that might be this next guy that I'm going to talk about, Seth Godin. Maybe it's Dolly Parton, Stephen King, Joe Biden, Taylor Swift, somebody that a lot of people have heard of and a lot of people would be searching for. This is what Tim Ferriss said. He said, the podcasting circuit has largely become the same authors appearing on 30 podcasts in any given week or two for book launches. That is accurate. And this is what I talk about, these middle grade people. No offense to being middle grade, but they're not celebrities necessarily. They are authors. They are somebody within a niche that you're working in. And those same people are going to the other podcasters within your niche. So you get lost. And that could be if you've got somebody really big. Could be Taylor Swift. I've already seen something about Taylor Swift. I've already seen something about Beyonce. I'm not saying to not take those if that happens, by the way. If it's somebody really big, put it out later. But a lot of times these big guys will come in. Your publishers will come in. Well, I've got Beyonce for you. I'm going to let you have her, but you've got to release it this date. That's good in general because, again, let's just use Beyonce. She's not coming on your podcast. I don't know your podcast, but sorry. She's not coming on it. Well, let's say she was coming on it. If she's doing 100 podcasts, why is somebody going to listen to yours rather than the others that they've seen? Most people probably won't, but a few people will. And that's great for Beyonce because she can go into the dark corners of the internet. This is what we just saw in our most recent presidential election. You've got Kamala Harris and you've got Donald Trump, and they are doing podcast after podcast after podcast after podcast, trying to get these undecided voters, people who are unlikely voters, and get them to do something. That is where they had to go to reach these people. Good for them, but for everybody else that's seen a bajillion interviews with these guys, not so good. I like what Tim is doing. And I want you to think about this. He's, by the way, made an exception for authors. It will be interesting to see how he handles this. He wants to be first. He didn't say it that way, but the rule of being on his podcast is you need to do this 3 months before your book launch. Not a month, not that week. He doesn't want to be one of the 15 to 30 podcasts that everybody's doing. He wants to differentiate himself. You got to go kiss that ring, man. He wants to be first. I think that's smart. Again, your podcast, not the only podcast that people who are interested in your topic are listening to. They're probably listening to, 5 or 6, 10. Some of these political podcasts, some people listen to tons of stuff all the time. That's how you see a lot of this media, especially the conservative media, just going crazy with podcast after podcast after podcast and episode after episode after episode of more or less the same thing. This 24-hour news cycle. It could be done, but that's only the hardcore people. You're not necessarily going for the hardcore people. They're going to listen anyway. Hardcore people, maybe they're into 15 or 30 interviews from the same person. Most people, they are not. Here's the big idea. You don't want your podcast to get lost by releasing the same episode, let's put that in quotes, as 30 other podcasts during the same week. If somebody's right in the middle of a press junket or launch, that is what is likely to happen. If you do get the opportunity to interview a great guest, do it. Do what you can to make the most of it. My suggestion, release it early, like Tim Ferriss, 3 weeks early, or release it after the fact. Curious about this. What rules do you have for your podcast? We talked about Tim's rules. They're linked at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. If you're going to reach out to me via Blue Sky, I would love to talk to you about that, maybe even feature you here on this podcast and within the newsletter. You can find the links to contact me and also Tim's rules at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 212. Steal this idea. 28 podcasting predictions for the new year. I don't have any predictions for the upcoming year, but I've got a list of people who do. I want you to note the format of this link. It's what we call a roundup. Remember those, the blog roundup? You get 10 or 20 experts, ask them the same question, like, what do you think is going to happen this year in your market? They give you an answer. Then, in theory, you've got those 10 or 20 experts that drive traffic to your page. Pretty smart. You could steal this idea for your podcast. Go to 10 or 20 experts, tape something with them, write it up. Make some graphics, send them a link, have them promote it for you. Let's look at these 28 podcasting predictions for the new year. I'm going to go through these live. I've not looked at them, not for a minute. I saw them, but kind of skimmed through them. Let's see what people are saying. The rise of video and accompanying analytics. Okay. Multi-channel podcasts by executives. Business leaders will increasingly use podcasts to amplify their company's marketing efforts and engage with consumers who follow people, not brands. Maybe. I don't know if that affects you. Split between open and proprietary platforms, meaning we're going to have RSS, which anybody can download off of, and also things like Spotify, YouTube. I'm not going to get into the argument that RSS is better. YouTube, obviously, a huge audience. Spotify, a huge audience. A lot of the old school podcasters, the guys I was talking about earlier, they love RSS. It's about free speech. It's about not getting shut down. Yeah. Okay, cool. Great. It's fine. It's not going anywhere. It'll still be in the future. But we've got to learn how to play with others, especially if others have that audience. Here's her advice to podcasters in the new year. Know your audience. Balance production and promotion. Very important. You got to have a good podcast to go out and promote it. But if you don't promote it, even having the best podcast, you're not going to reach as many people as you could. Don't discount video. Agreed. But let me say this. If you're an audio first person, and I am, don't discount audio. Theater of the mind. It's me reaching you. It's you reaching your people. When video is not necessarily an option. You're at the gym, you're driving, you're washing dishes. I don't know why people think video is better. YouTube, it's a closed platform. And there are plenty, and this is really the majority of podcasters, who are not doing well on YouTube. A lot of very well-known podcasters, you go to watch their YouTube channel, the video is just not needed. It's not exciting. They're not reaching people on YouTube. And what you see when you go look them up on YouTube, because they've got a view counter there, a low number, somebody else has 7 million views, you've got 258, it looks like you're not that popular. It can actually hurt you. She said to build a community. I agree with that. I think live events are huge. People want to talk to other people who are interested in what they are interested in. Can they do that around your podcast? Yeah, man. And you don't have to necessarily do this yourself. You can have your listeners do this. There's a great magazine. It's a hacker magazine, I guess we call it. I think it used to be called the Hacker Quarterly. 2600. The first Friday of every month, all around the world, people gather and they discuss hacker stuff, 2600 stuff. And it used to be they were everywhere. I looked at this recently, maybe last month. There's still a lot of these going on. We're talking something that's been happening for 40 years. You could do the same thing regardless of your topic. Your topic is running. Get some runners together. Have a running group every Saturday morning all around the country. I'm in Nashville. Let's meet at this park. You're in New York. You meet at that park. Somebody starts it. You promote it. Somebody picks it up in their area. It becomes a thing. They connect, yes, on running, but they're also connecting around your podcast. You're the person in charge. Maybe they're listening to your podcast as you are running. You do a special podcast for that. Every Saturday morning, here's some running motivation for you. You don't do running, do you? This works for anything. Hacking, running, motherhood, homeschooling, cars, whatever you're doing, you could do a meetup like this. Here's another prediction. This year, I think we'll see a shift in how video podcasters understand their audiences. We've already got tons of data on this. This is the great thing about having a closed solution. If everybody's on YouTube, we've got data for all those people. You can go into your analytics. You can see what got people and what stopped people. You can see where people skipped around. You can see where people paused. You can see how many people listened and watched. That one's sort of a no. Yeah, we've been doing that. More executives and business professionals will create multi-channel podcasts, video, audio, social media as an amplifier for their company's marketing efforts. Yeah, they've been doing that. Executives and business professionals, that's what the first person talked about. People are connecting with people, not necessarily brands. Does that connect with you? Well, if you're an executive, you got an opportunity. Split between traditional open apps like Apple Podcasts and Overcast and proprietary video-focused apps like YouTube and Spotify. This is the same answer said a million different ways. More podcasters will begin making moves toward being always on or closer to always on shows. I don't know what she means by that. Let's find out. Limited run seasonal shows are great and can be really impactful for brands and storytelling, but they are limiting when it comes to marketing and eventual monetization. Who is doing seasons and limited run podcasts? Some people. But working in this space, the majority of people that I see are doing a weekly podcast, a semi-weekly podcast, a daily podcast even. The more serious podcasters will find ways to better understand their audiences and adapt to them. Maybe YouTube, Spotify, somebody's got all the data. All right, that's a no answer. Narrative podcast, hybrid interview documentary form, and even forms like monologues are on the upswing. Disagree with that. Especially about the monologues. Yeah, more people are getting into monologues, maybe, because there is a level of skill that most people do not have. We're not born with that, and we don't learn it like we do conversations. But the non-monologue podcasts are so much easier for people to listen to. By the way, thanks for hanging out with me. This being a monologue podcast, I know, man. Actually, in the new year, I've thought about bringing in other people and doing interviews, doing a co-host, where things are a little bit easier to listen to passively. Maybe we'll see more of that from me. Next one, podcasting will see technology and content come together in more seamless and intuitive ways. Again, no shit. Video has become a default option for most production companies. No. I don't agree with that. You might think this, and a lot of people might think this, is because YouTube is everywhere and so many people are seeing things on YouTube. They're not doing podcasts, they're doing YouTube channels. Nothing wrong with that, but that is different from a podcast. That is different from an audio or non-YouTube channel. YouTube is its own thing. If you think that you're going to do a podcast and put talking head videos up on YouTube and have anybody care, you are wrong. Will you get crumbs? Yes. These things that I'm talking about, motherhood, homeschooling, cars, hackers. You can put anything up on YouTube, 1,000 people will come and listen to it or watch it, or at least the counter will say 1,000. They might skip around, they might not stick around very long, but you will attract some people. That doesn't mean they're going to stick around. That doesn't mean they're going to like, follow, and subscribe. That simply means you've got some numbers and maybe you think you're doing okay, but when it comes to the real connection, do not neglect audio. Audio first. As I mentioned, you are in their ears as they are enjoying their life. You are the background soundtrack to their lives. Driving, exercise, washing dishes. You do not do that with YouTube. This is you following them in their daily lives, letting them do whatever they do, not interrupting their daily lives for them to come to you. Audio is much easier to integrate into somebody's life than a YouTube video. And if somebody is on YouTube, by the way, watching you all the time, they're also watching other YouTube videos. That's what I said earlier about somebody who's listening to, or in this case, watching you. You're not the only person they're consuming. They're watching other people. And if they're already watching YouTube, yeah, maybe they found you, but they can click away from you just as easily as they clicked onto you. So no, video is not a default option. Let's do a couple more. We'll see a resurgence in the smaller, tight-knit communities of early podcasting. And that's what I was talking about earlier. Not a lot of people around, niche markets, live events. People want to connect with other people that are excited about what they are excited about. This is why people like something like Reddit or hyper-local podcast. The most successful podcast I have ever had, and I'm talking about on a per listener basis, a hyper-local podcast for one neighborhood, 1,500 houses. Big chunk of the neighborhood, local coffee shop paid a lot of money before the thing was even live to be a sponsor of it. It is a short podcast, maybe 7 minutes a week, but very successful to them. Lots of listeners, all in the same geographic area. If you want to make money podcasting, that is the way to do it. How many neighborhoods do you have in your city? I looked at mine, about 50 that I would count. Not like a cul-de-sac or something, but a real neighborhood with a real audience, about 1,500 people or more. You can make those things all day long, make $5,000, $10,000 a pop. No joke. You want more thoughts on it? Let's talk a Big Podcast AMP audio monetization program, bigpodcast.com/AMP. All right, one more for you. Prediction for the coming year. It says consumer preferences are changing. Audiences are shifting to video-first platforms. No. What is this? The video off. God. Let me get one more that's not video. It's getting more and more difficult to book my clients on other shows with straight up pitching. More creative partnership solutions have been needed. I agree with this woman. You're not going to be able to get on a podcast by being a normal person. You've got to actually do something noteworthy. And I hope that you are doing this with the guests that are on your podcast. Podcasting is real media these days. It is not fringe. It is not strictly hobbyist or extremely narrow niches. Because of that, the guests have to work a little bit harder. They've got to have something to say. And I don't know who this lady is booking. A lot of times PR guys, booking agents, they take whoever's going to pay them. And this is something to think about if you're thinking, I'm going to get an agent to book me on podcasts. Do you have something to say? Do you have something that people are going to want to hear? If you don't, they're going to book you, but it's going to be on the low-level podcast. And these agents say, I got you on 10 podcasts this week. Low-hanging fruit. Get you on the sucker list. I've got a client of mine. This dude was having a hard time saying no. Good host. But man, he was saying yes to everything. Scared to say no. Well, they might be good. It's like, man, dude, you're on the sucker list. They are coming to you because these people are paying for however many placements, 10 placements, 20 placements, maybe more. And they know that with one call or one email, you will say yes. Because again, pretty good host. He was doing a good job, but he was saying yes to everything and he was getting burnt out. It's fine to say yes to these guests at the very beginning of your podcasting career. And it's fine to say yes to these guests if maybe you need practice as an interviewer. You want to know what it's like and have to develop the skills to pull these elementary guests through your episode, because that's what you're going to have to do. So many of these agents, oh my gosh, that's a whole nother story, man. That is a whole nother story. It's embarrassing. And not to beat up on PR guys, publicists, because when you find a good one, they will work with you and they are amazing. But some of these guys, it is just a pump and dump. Man, I got this guy. He's amazing, absolutely incredible. He will be perfect for your podcast. You're going to love him. And you got somebody who doesn't know how to use a mic on a remote interview, who doesn't have anything to say, isn't that interesting, has never been at the level that you're working at. They've been doing these low-hanging fruits. They're not good at talking. And they'll say, I've got a special offer for your listeners. No. We're not doing that. That's one of the ways you can tell a brand new guest, because they've got this very basic online business and they've bought into this stuff. Go on podcast. Give them a lead magnet. That's how you'll build your list. Then you can sell them some stuff. No, it's more complicated than that, man. You want these predictions? There are plenty of them. Some of them actually not having anything to do with video. I've got them linked. You'll find that link at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 212. Automate your podcast guest booking for $39. I've got an all-in-one scheduling tool for you to help you take control of your podcast guest booking. You're going to streamline your guest booking process with customizable pages. You're going to reduce no-shows with automated reminders and appointment management tools, meaning Your guest is going to get a text message. Your guest is going to get emails. You're going to get a text message and emails. Hey, man, remember that interview you set up 3 weeks ago? It's today. Get on it. It's going to be in your calendar. So if you're on Central Time and you've got a guest on Eastern, it does those calculations for you. A sleek, minimalist flow lets guests book in just 3 clicks. A custom intake form and questionnaire that's going to ask your guests questions that are important to you getting a good interview down. It's a fully branded experience. Your logo, your colors, your design, that's going to be on the form, and it's $39. One-time payment. You're going to love this thing. I've got the link to it. Newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 212. How to protect your podcast. I've got a related joke to this. You can find it, newsletter.bigpodcast.com, issue number 212. I'm using this as a gentle reminder that there are a couple things you need to do for your podcast. One, you need to lock down your feed. Don't let somebody transfer your feed somewhere else and you lose control of it. By the way, you really need to have a feed that is using your domain. If you look at the domain for this feed, feed.bigpodcast.com. That's the domain I use. Not Libsyn, Captivate, Buzzcast. Nothing wrong with those companies. Absolutely not. But when it comes to controlling your feed, it needs to be on your domain. You need to lock that feed down so nobody can transfer it out from under you. Reach out to your media host if you don't know how to do that. I want to talk about password managers for a minute. I've got a couple of them. I like to use 1Password. And basically what this is this is a secure database. I've got a master password, the 1Password, 1Password to rule them all. It opens up everything. And then I've got hundreds and hundreds of very secure passwords. Not like Guitar 1. My friend used to have a password. He was a guitar player, guy in Nashville. Guitar. That was his password. I said, what? You got to be kidding me. The same password on everything. It's what we call a dictionary word. Easy to crack. No. You need something that looks like code. And 1Password's going to handle that for you. It remembers everything. All you have to do is remember the 1Password to rule them all. I've been using it for years, probably 10 or 12 years without issue. There's a free open source version of something very similar called Bitwarden. I have links to both of these things. You will find them at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Conan didn't want a video podcast. I teased this a minute ago. I know. I'm an audio first guy. But I'm also somebody that gets that there's a time and place for video. Conan's a video guy, but he didn't want a video podcast either. However, I've got a link to these comments from his podcast, Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend. It is on YouTube, and I want you to read these comments. Listen to what people are saying about his videos. We want the full videos exactly like they are now. No overproduction, no makeup. We love seeing you guys creating the podcast. The video and audio is great. We just want to see it all. Don't change anything. No need for makeup. No need to style hairs. We love what you do and love what we see because it's authentic and well executed for something kind of improvised. I'm partially deaf and I only watch the podcast and videos, never audio. I like to be able to see people talking and have subtitles when I'm listening to a podcast. We might be biased as a YouTube audience. Again, these are from YouTube. But the full video podcast is the biggest win for you all. People need a raise, but also no makeup. If anything, everyone needs to dress worse. Somebody says to Conan, you look good, Conan. No makeup or surgery needed. We would not watch if any of you were off-putting. So all of you could just stay perfect just as you are. Something worth noting, I was talking about talking head videos. He's got a little bit more than a talking head video. It is what I would call a roundtable video. They're just doing a read-through, sitting at a round table. Each of them have mics. Each of them has a camera. It's not flashy, but keep in mind this. We have known Conan for years. He was a writer for The Simpsons, late night show. He's got his own show. He's been around for a long, long time. That's a little bit different than most people. Probably you. However, it is a way to connect with your audience if you want a different opinion than the one that I'm more or less sharing throughout this episode about video. No, you don't need video. I'm an audio first guy. This will balance that out. I've got it linked, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 212. Classified ads for you. These are things that will help you to grow your podcast, get more people to your podcast, make more money with your podcast. Book Like a Boss, another guest booking tool. If you're tired of guests missing interviews, Book Like a Boss handles all the little details when it comes to guest booking, automated guest scheduling, automatic reminders, including text messages sent to guests. It integrates with all email and calendar software. I've got a free trial for it. Compare it to this other thing that I'm talking about. You'll find both links at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. You need to get a booking system. I started this episode talking about the new technologies that we've got. Yeah. Booking is one of those things. You owe it to yourself as cheap as a one-time payment of only $39. You've got two options here. Newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 212. pCloud, lifetime storage. You were working too hard on your podcast to lose episodes. I've got 10 gigabytes for you. You can get it free. pCloud, another service I've been using for years. Amazing. Back up everything there. I've got it on my phone. Anywhere I go, my backups are secure. There's actually a locked down encrypted folder. So if you really don't want people seeing what you got online, you're worried about the cloud and security, pCloud's got you, man. First 10 gigabytes free. I'm going to give it to you through this special link. Don't lose your hard work. Make sure you're backing things up. You'll find that link, newsletter.bigpodcast.com, issue number 212. Thanks for listening to Build a Big Podcast. You want to work with me? Let's make that happen this year. Bigpodcast.com/amp, bigpodcast.com/AMP. I'm going to hold your hand, guide you through this process, take you from where you are to where you want to be. More information, bigpodcast.com/AMP. While you're on the bigpodcast.com site, sign up for the newsletter. Every week it's going out, the audio edition of this newsletter. You're listening to it now. You can also subscribe to that. Both of those things are free. I've got some other free tools for you too at bigpodcast.com, including the Podcast Growth Toolkit, a lot of stuff. All of it designed to help you grow your podcast audience, get more people to your podcast, and make money with your podcast. So go there now before you forget. Bigpodcast.com. What do you want? Big podcast? Go to bigpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. Thanks for spending the year with me. I'm looking forward to many more years ahead. And I could not have done it without you. Seriously. Give yourself a hand. And once you're done with that, use those hands. Bigpodcast.com. Go there, sign up. I'll see you on the next episode of Build a Big Podcast.